Right now, the video you're watching is 100% complete. I filmed everything, I've recorded all the voiceover, I've edited in all the clips and mixed all the sound, which I kind of suck at, but it's all 100% done. For you, not for me. For me, it's, 24% complete? But it's about 39% done for me. Time is a weird soup.
Time is a weird soup.
Soup? The truth is, I've been trained to aim for 100% completion since the first time I picked up a PlayStation controller in 1998. And in video games, 100% completion feels amazing. The Platinum Trophy, the finished bestiary. Even when a new generation of Pokemon feels a little bit lackluster, the satisfaction of a completed Pokedex feels better than heroin. But more than just feeling good, 100% completion in video games, for some people, is kind of a philosophy or an ideology, even a dogma. It is, for a certain kind of person, the truest and most satisfying version of a gaming experience, so fundamental to what video games are that playing any other way is essentially a waste of time. Personally, I'm not that extreme, but I am plenty obsessive. More than once, I've run programs to rip all dialogue text from an RPG just to see if I'd missed any crucial scenes. And while I didn't personally collect every item in the Dark Souls trilogy, I did create a personal encyclopedia of key topics based on the item descriptions. When I love a game, I tend to dive deep. And I love Triangle Strategy, a visual novel with light RPG elements. It's an engrossing, epic, and gleefully operatic game. Every character, from the king to the cook, has a soliloquy ready to go at a moment's notice. Combat is satisfying and crunchy, and the developers were brave enough to give players all the tools they need to break the game if they're clever. Triangle Strategy looks gorgeous. It sounds gorgeous. The gameplay meshes perfectly with the story, and the story actually has some meaningful things to say. But as much as I love Triangle Strategy, I will never 100% complete the game. In fact, it's because I love it that I will never technically complete the game. And I'm not just talking about missing a few cutscenes or characters. There's an entire branch of the game's story that I will never play through. I love Triangle Strategy too much to complete it 100%. Growing up in the 90s, some of my most formative gaming experiences were with games intentionally designed to nudge players towards 100% completion. The most obvious example is Pokemon. But there were plenty of other games that pushed the same buttons. I absolutely loved Ape Escape, which locks the true final boss behind a requirement to catch 100% of the escaped monkeys. Crash Bandicoot reminded you of your completion percentage every time you saved your game. And Neversoft figured out that skateboarding and collectibles go together like caffeine and cocaine, but for kids. My malleable young brain learned quickly that getting 100% in a game and finishing a game were effectively the same thing. Catch every ape, find every hidden level, collect every VHS tape. And anytime I set aside a game before reaching that 100% milestone, it felt like I was giving up. The first time I questioned the 100% dogma, I was 19 years old with a gun in my hand, blasting lasers at Roman Legion cosplayers in an irradiated wasteland.
The Boneyard, Phoenix, New Vegas, they're just places, metal and stone. When the walls come tumbling down, when you lose everything you have, you always have family. And your family always has tribe.
On my original playthrough of Fallout New Vegas, I didn't realize that the final mission would lock me out of further exploration. Far before I had fully explored the wasteland, I led the New California Republic to victory at the Hoover Dam. I debated Caesar's legate into submission with my god-level oration skills. The credits rolled, and I prepared to dive back into my adventure, but I couldn't. There's no going back when New Vegas is over. It's a game without a post-game. When the credits roll, that really is the end. Technically, I still had my save file from right before the Hoover Dam mission, but too much had happened since then. I was playing on hardcore mode and my companion, Veronica, had died in the final battle. It felt ghoulish and cheap to rewind to a save file where her sacrifice had never happened. So I decided to consciously accept my incomplete playthrough. I had cut a unique personal path through the wasteland, seeing not everything, not 100% of the game, only the stuff that happened to become part of my personal version of the adventure. It felt strange to call it quits, but not exactly wrong. And anyway, I knew I'd come back to New Vegas someday. When I finally did return to New Vegas in my 20s, I explored every inch of the wasteland. I scoured the grid, finished every quest, and I even ran through the DLC. And yeah, there was a lot of incredible stuff I'd missed the first time through, but finding that stuff felt less like I was going on my own personal adventure and more like I was completing a checklist. I think it's possible that I accidentally played the game the right way when I was
19.
That a shorter journey through New Vegas, driven by the momentum of the plot rather than by an obsession to 100% complete the game, was a more satisfying way to approach the wasteland. But if there's one skill I've perfected in my life, it's the ability not to learn an important lesson when it is punching me directly in the face. Deep down, I still felt like I was supposed to drain every drop of every video game that I loved, all the way down to 100%, no matter what. And that's the mindset that I brought with me into Triangle Strategy. Triangle Strategy is a tactical role-playing game released in 2022 for the Nintendo Switch. It's a co-production between Square Enix, the RPG juggernaut responsible for Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, and ArtDink, a more unconventional developer known for train simulators, oceanic holiday games, and anthropomorphic dominoes. A number of studios auditioned to develop Triangle Strategy, but ArtDink was selected based on their ability to weave authentic pixel art into a rotating 3D environment. Pixel art means a lot to Triangle Strategy's producer, Tomoya Asano, the man who helmed the Nintendo DS remakes of Final Fantasy III and IV before producing the Bravely Default series and Octopath Traveler. Along with Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy falls very much in Asano's wheelhouse of retro JRPG revival, embracing pixelated visuals and traditional game mechanics. Retro game design is truly a labor of love for Asano. To him, the classic games built on that aging scaffolding were profound and precious experiences.
Final Fantasy IV was the first game that made me cry. We wanted to remake the game treasuring those very events and drama, without ruining anything. Tomoya Asano on Final Fantasy IV DS.
Triangle Strategy draws heavy inspiration from the classic strategy RPG canon, games like Fire Emblem and Tactics Ogre, but that wasn't always the plan. When I called Triangle Strategy a visual novel, I was only half wrong. That's actually how the game started development.
From the really early years of Triangle Strategy, we created just an original story for this game as a kind of book, readable scenario, without thinking of any game aspects. But we kind of failed that approach.
It's not a surprise then that Triangle Strategy is loaded with dense, talkative cutscenes, but the interactive elements are definitely not just afterthoughts. The mechanics may look as retro as the visuals at first blush, but they've been updated and carefully refined. Although playing Triangle Strategy might remind you of Final Fantasy Tactics or Shining Force, it's a much smoother experience with less clutter and jank slowing things down for new players. There are integrated tutorials, freely adjustable difficulty settings, and other quality of life features that we could only dream about in the ancient days from which Triangle Strategy draws its inspiration. A lot of those quality of life features were pulled directly from player feedback after the release of the Triangle Strategy demo. The developers made an exhaustive effort to fine-tune every button press and reshade menu panels based on that early feedback, all in an effort to make Triangle Strategy a silky smooth gameplay experience. It's nice to play something so frictionless and smooth, don't get me wrong, but I don't mind broken games personally. I kind of prefer them. What's more important to me is that Triangle Strategy is crafted in a way that emphasizes characterization, not just in static cutscenes, but in the actual gameplay itself. Compared to units in most tactical RPGs, your individual team members in Triangle Strategy are extremely specialized. Many of them possess a totally unique mechanic that only they can use, like the ability to construct ladders or the ability to move with stealth. From a game design perspective, this specialization comes at a cost. Your ability to customize your characters is limited. In Final Fantasy Tactics, you could make your main character a knight, a healer, a mathematician, a dragoon, an oracle, or a dozen other classes. In Triangle Strategy, your main character can only ever perform one role. But because there are plenty of characters to choose from, and because each of those characters is easy to level up, Triangle Strategy still gives you meaningful choices through team composition and the ways you choose to synergize your characters. And those choices radically alter the course and the tempo of combat. Will you rewrite the terrain with chutes and ladders? Will you drench it in torrential rain? You have a stationary archer and a mobile archer. Can you afford to bring both into battle? If not, which kind of archer best fits your battle plan? The biggest upside of hyper-specializing each unit is the opportunity for characterization through combat. To better understand what I mean, let's look at Eridor.
小さかった我がが良き伴侶を得られた。感無量だ。
本当に声が大きいですね。
おっと失礼。どうか慣れてください。
For a long stretch of Triangle Strategy, Eridor is the only character who can trick enemies into focusing their attacks on him. He has high defense and a mountain of HP, and if you need someone to reliably soak up punishment to defend your more vulnerable characters, he's your guy. Your only guy. And his gameplay function as a reliable physical tank meshes perfectly with his identity as a character, a trustworthy and affable guardian with down-to-earth everyman sensibilities. So when you finally meet a second character with similar abilities, Flanagan, the game has trained you to interpret his personality in the story through his role in combat, to consider him reliable and solid. Where a character likes to be in combat, how they move through the field of battle, and what roles they fit into. These elements become an important narrative lens for friend and foe alike. Cowardly enemies flee where overconfident enemies charge in. Plucky civilians contribute from a distance while trained soldiers endure the hazards of close combat. Every unit's hyper-specialization becomes an integral part of the story that Triangle Strategy is trying to tell. So, what is that story? Well, have you seen Game of Thrones? Triangle Strategy borrows liberally from HBO's infamous Dragon show, but mostly in terms of surface aesthetics. Our heroes belong to the Wolffort clan, and the main character, Serenoa Wolffort, dresses exactly like Jon Snow even though he lives extremely far from, snow. You live in a temperate climate. You do not need all that fur. Spotting superficial connections to Game of Thrones is easy and fun, but Triangle Strategy is designed to tell a very different kind of story. Because even before Game of Thrones devolved into a big, shiny spectacle, its concern with logistics was more a question of set dressing than screenwriting. Where did lumber come from? Which organizations policed which trade routes? If the Greyjoys were so destitute, how could they afford to furnish their massive fleet? The show didn't ask, and it didn't really care. And that's perfectly fine. Not everything has to be granular and crunchy. But in Triangle Strategy, logistics and resources are at the core of the story. As you might have guessed, there are 3 main factions in Triangle Strategy, and each faction derives its power by monopolizing a specific resource. In the north, Icefrost controls the iron mines. In the east, Hyzante controls salt production. Between them, Glenbrook controls the rivers that make trade possible. Those 3 monopolies endow each faction's ruling class with the power to enact a very specific political vision. Icefrost is a land of unfettered capitalism promising total liberty. Hyzante is ruled by a theocratic autocracy promising true egalitarianism. And the Kingdom of Glenbrook is feudalist in the medieval sense, clinging to old traditions. So basically, you've got Ayn Rand bullshit over here, Tradcath bullshit over here, and King Arthur bullshit over here. The ruling classes all want to seize each other's monopolies, and they use their contrasting philosophies as pretexts for war. Don't get me wrong, the continent of Norzelia is still a swords and sorcery world, a world with fire wizards and the ability to pray away mortal wounds, and the script's sweeping, theatrical tone creates even further distance between Norzelia and the real world. But because the ruling classes of Norzelia wage war for realistic reasons, and because each nation embraces an ideology with clear parallels to real-world philosophies, there are many times where the fantasy choices in Triangle Strategy carry heavy real-world baggage. And forcing the player to make difficult, meaningful choices is at the core of what Triangle Strategy is trying to do.
A tactical RPG that will challenge your convictions.
The story of Triangle Strategy is broken up into multiple parallel routes which interweave and diverge based on the decisions you make in the game. But those decisions aren't just up to the player, not exactly. When facing a difficult decision, Serenoa puts the matter to a vote with his most trusted advisors, each of whom has their own opinion about what's right and what's wrong. To sway the outcome in one direction, you have to persuade the advisors who disagree, carefully considering which arguments will be most persuasive based on the individual advisor's values and personality. You know Eredor. He's reliable, loyal, and down to earth, in the gameplay and in the cutscenes. Knowing that, how will you persuade him to help you smuggle illicit goods for a craven enemy? I fucking love this game. Just like the developers and Team Asano smoothed out Triangle Strategy's gameplay based on player feedback, they also implemented the excellent persuasion system, after playtesters rejected an earlier concept wherein Serenoa would have bribed his advisors with presents. To those testers, and to the team that listened to their feedback, I extend my deepest gratitude. When I started Triangle Strategy, I already knew that there were multiple routes through the story and multiple endings to see, and my 100% loving brain kicked into high gear. I was going to play every route, try out every choice, unlock every ending, no matter how long it took me. So on my first playthrough, whenever Triangle Strategy threw a difficult choice at me, there was an added layer of intrigue. Some of the available solutions seemed short-sighted, callous, or just outright foolish, but I knew I'd be picking those very solutions sooner or later in order to see every route and 100% complete the game. And then I encountered a decision that I knew I could never possibly make.
ただし、汝らの領土内にいるローゼル族。彼らがここハイサンドの聖域に帰るよう取り計らってもらいたい。とのこと。
In the fictional continent of Norzelia, the Roselle are a severely oppressed minority, marked to the outside world by their inherited trait of bright pink hair. They don't correspond one-to-one with any particular minority in the real world, functioning more as an anime pastiche of multiple different forms of historical oppression. In Icefrost, they live as illegitimate consorts to the ruling class. In Glenbrook, they live in an isolated, segregated community. And in Hyzant, where religious doctrine declares them sinful by nature, they are forced to endure inhumane conditions mining salt, forced labor that fuels the engine of Hyzantian wealth and political influence. So, yes, there are real-world parallels. That first choice I couldn't make in Triangle Strategy involves the Roselle. It occurs at a point in the story when Serenoa and his allies are desperate, broken, and alone. The throne of Glenbrook has been seized by Icefrost's military, who are systematically working to claim the entire region as their own. House Wolffort doesn't have anywhere near the military might to stand against Icefrost, and so Hyzant's ruling class, sensing an opportunity, makes Serenoa an offer. The isolated village of Roselle living in Glenbrook technically live under House Wolffort's protection. Hyzant's oligarchs demand that Serenoa must hand over the Roselle, plucking them from their homes and condemning every man, woman, and child to a short life of hard labor. In exchange, instead of invading, Hyzant's oligarchs will offer generous aid to House Wolffort. I knew right then that I could never truly 100% this game. I knew that I could never, on any playthrough for any reason, hand over the Roselle. It's not like the choices leading up to that one were easy. Will you pledge loyalty to a tyrant for a chance to rise up in the future, even if it means, in the present, you'll have to meet your countrymen on the field of battle? Will you surrender a dear friend as a hostage to ensure that your citizens never have to witness the horrors of war firsthand? These are weighty choices I felt strongly about, but which had plausible pros and cons, room for reasonable disagreement. Some of the options seemed wrong to me, but they were options which I could justify choosing in order to experience more of a game that I really loved. The choice to surrender the Roselle felt different. Committing a struggling minority to suffering for the gain of the privileged goes against everything I believe. Not I, Serenoa, not the metafictional projection of myself in Triangle Strategy which blurs my real life and the life of a fictional lordling, but I, Edward, real life me, the beating heart and crackling brain and the hands holding the controller. To fully interrogate how this choice affected me, I think it's important to explain the me part of that equation, who I am and what real-world values guide my choices. When I was a teen in the ancient days of the early aughts, my politics were center-left. I was a capital D Democrat. I enthusiastically supported the new California Republic.
It's not perfect, but it's worth protecting, which is why we also have the largest military in existence.
But I was a center-left Democrat in the conservative suburbs of San Antonio, Texas. And at the time, my center-left politics felt radical. I advocated for gay marriage. I believed climate change was real. And to a majority of my peers, my mild Democrat opinions were far-left loony nonsense. Most of my teachers thought that my politics were way too far to the left, and they thought that as I got older, I would become more conservative. But then, a few interesting things happened.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
Earlier this week, the Washington Post reported President Obama has granted a CIA request to launch drone attacks, even if it does not know the identities of those who will be killed.
Protesters who challenged police were arrested.
They came with force and they bulldozed the camp.
Children and adults are seen huddled together in the building that's divided up into chain-link fencing that looks like a cage.
Guys, come to our shot, come to our shot, come to our shot.
And you can see how the police engage with Indigenous and Black communities to this day remains connected to that history of our humanity not being respected from that institution at its very inception.
I did not drift to the right as I got older. In fact, I swerved hard to the left. I am not a suburban conservative. I am an anti-capitalist who believes that we should defund the police and seize homes for the unhoused. I left the enclave of white middle-class suburbia. I read some history, I kept an open mind about the world, and left is where that took me. My politics are not an organ that I can turn off or surgically remove. They're intrinsic, rooted in knowledge that I can't unknow. I know that I've lived all my life on stolen land. This is Coahuiltecan land. I know that the nation I live in was built by forced labor and by the exercise of unjustifiable military force. I know that many of the opportunities I personally have been afforded have come at the direct expense of my neighbors, of people that I know, people that I love, and people that I've never met. I bring that knowledge and those values into the games and stories that I care about. When Terranigma tells me that Christopher Columbus is a really cool guy, I cringe. When Heaven Will Be Mine celebrates trans love in outer space, I cheer. And when somebody tells me that I should keep my politics out of video games, I yawn. It's a disservice to yourself and the stories you love when you keep the two at arm's length. The messy, truly interesting stuff only reveals itself to you when you let yourself get invested. It's way safer to just dip your toes into the pool. It can never hurt you, but it can never change you either. It's always better to dive headfirst into the deep end, even if you might break your teeth against the tile. So even in a world as fantastical and unreal as Norzelia, where armored knights ride hawks through the sky and shamans bring down lightning storms, deliberate parallels to the real world give players an opportunity to explore and challenge their own real-world values. Practicality versus idealism, loyalty versus security. With every decision, Triangle Strategy encourages you to bring your real feelings into the experience. And because I love Triangle Strategy, I did bring my real feelings in. The Roselle aren't real, but the modes of oppression they endure are. Every other choice up to that point in the game felt like something I could stomach, something I could at least consider. But I couldn't stomach surrendering the Roselle, not even in a fictional space, and that meant I could never experience everything the Triangle strategy had to offer. That's the surface level of what to me felt like a very striking moment. I confronted a choice that I couldn't bear in a video game that I wanted to complete 100%. Two core aspects of my identity were in tension, and tension is where all the interesting stuff lives. But there are other aspects of that moment worth interrogating too. For starters, even after buying fully into Triangle strategy and taking the choice very seriously, nagging at the back of my mind was the knowledge that the game would never truly let me hurt myself. To explain what I mean, let's compare Triangle strategy with one of its major influences, the 1995 strategy RPG classic, Tactics Ogre: Let Us Cling Together. Compared to Triangle strategy, Tactics Ogre is much less playfully theatrical and much more stoic. It's also a game willing to get quite a bit darker and more depressing than Triangle strategy, which has a bad habit of tying up tragedy in a neat bow. And for my money, Tactics Ogre is a lot savvier about classism and the way that ruling classes exploit the poor. Triangle strategy feels like it could air on HBO, but Tactics Ogre feels like it was co-written by Howard Zinn. I fucking love that game. Early in Tactics Ogre, the protagonist, Denim, faces a major ethical dilemma that splits the game's narrative, just like the decisions in Triangle strategy. Denim's quest seems black and white at the start. An evil foreign military has seized control of his home, so Denim joins the revolutionary effort. He takes part in a mission to liberate a community of poor workers from the foreign enemy, to recruit the workers as allies, but he doesn't get the reception he expected. The people of the village want nothing to do with the war effort. Denim is shocked, but his superiors aren't. They fully expected to be met with ambivalence, and so they order Denim to enact Plan B, to help them burn the village to the ground, a war crime they can blame on their foreign enemies. Whether or not to assist in burning the village is a choice left to you, the player, a choice which defines the shape of the rest of the story. Hot take? Burning impoverished civilians alive is wrong. Leave your pro-burning opinions in the comments, I guess. But that's not actually the choice that Tactics Ogre gives you. It's made abundantly clear to the player that defending the village will not accomplish anything. You cannot stop the revolutionaries. The villagers sealed their fate the moment they refused to join the war effort, and no matter what you choose, they are going to die. Moreover, if you choose to defend the village, your superiors will make you the scapegoat, slandering you as a traitor who single-handedly started the blaze on behalf of the evil foreigners. If you stand with the villagers, they will die and you will take the blame. You'll be hated by everyone you've ever met, everyone in your home country, as a turncoat and a mass murderer, forced into hiding, constantly hunted and scorned until the day you die. And the gameplay bears this out. If you defend the villagers, you do lose allied units, you do lose resources, you are hated by everyone. But even knowing all of those consequences, and knowing that it's pointless to stand with the villagers, can you bring yourself to follow your orders? Can you really make the choice to stand by and watch while innocent people burn? Tactics Ogre forces you to make a choice with teeth. A choice where one answer leads to cushy in-game rewards and another leads to real in-game consequences. And by comparison, the Roselle choice in Triangle strategy feels toothless. The narrative framing is that defending the Roselle from Hyzant is a huge risk, one that could cause the downfall of House Wolfort, but the in-game reality is nowhere near that brutal. Whether you defend the Roselle or betray them, you fight a battle of roughly equivalent difficulty on the same map. Then, if you defend the Roselle, you find a plot MacGuffin which you use to barter with Hyzant, securing their generous aid. The narrative threads barely diverge. You don't really sacrifice anything, and you face no major consequences. The only real drawback to defending the Roselle is missing out on one recruitable character out of 30. And yes, my 100% brain 100% wanted that unit. But whether the choice was too objectionable on its face, or the game just didn't make a stern enough threat, I couldn't bear to abandon the Roselle. But hey, that's not so bad, right? I'd basically be 99% completing the game. Pretty good. I didn't do all the B-sides in Celeste, I didn't finish the decks in Pokemon Sword. 99%. Not bad. All things considered, I felt like I was getting off pretty easy. And then I got to the ending. As you might have guessed, Triangle Strategy ultimately diverges into 4 ending routes. That sounds wrong, but it makes sense in context. Serenoa has 3 main advisors, and near the end, each of those 3 advisors pitches a different path for Serenoa to follow. The 4th ending, which sees you persuading all 3 advisors into one accord, is basically the game's true ending, although the developers insist that no one ending is more true than the others. But, you know, come on. Since every route was designed to be fulfilling, even if it was the only one a player got to see, those routes are all individually substantial, full of unique revelations about Norzelia and the world beyond its borders. Benedict, the cold and calculating advisor, pitches Serenoa a politically savvy solution in which old grudges give way to strange bedfellows for the good of House Wolfort. Frederica, the idealistic Roselle advisor, recommends a daring path that would see Serenoa abandon his past to choose a beautiful future for the oppressed. And Roland, the bad advisor, says, what if we just let the evil church win? Roland, what the fuck? Roland Glenbrook is an idealistic and tempestuous prince, and sometimes he is also Char Aznable. He starts the story a little off-kilter, and the tragedies he endures only further exacerbate his impulsive tendencies. So I didn't expect Roland to be a tactical genius, but his pitch to let Hyzante win still took me by surprise. Under Hyzantian rule, the Roselle would have nowhere to run. Wherever they lived, they would suffer terribly. Roland suggests surrender to Hyzante with full awareness that their theocracy is built on bigotry and lies. They literally worship a real doll. This was the second time the game asked me to betray the Roselle, and this time the choice had teeth. A huge part of the game, one of the 4 endings, was completely locked behind that choice. And the other choices have huge drawbacks of their own. Benedict's plan would make Icefrost libertarianism the law of all Norzelia, widening the gulf between the rich and the poor. Frederica's plan requires you to abandon the people who pledged their fealty to you as their lord, to abandon almost all of Norzelia to a brutal war between Hyzante and Icefrost. Every route has awful consequences, and also 99%. I'd already made a sacrifice, I'd already forsaken 100% completion, but I at least wanted that 99%. I was torn, and so I asked some internet strangers for advice. I asked how they felt about my unwillingness to play Roland's ending. A few people recommended that I could just turn on fast forward whenever the story made me too uncomfortable. Well-meaning advice which fundamentally misses the point. It's like covering your eyes during the scariest parts of a horror movie, only worse because you're the one doing all of the horror. But the most common advice I got, by far, was to just watch somebody else play Roland's route if I couldn't play it myself. And that's not bad advice. It's a big internet and the footage is out there. Except I've been down that road before. Undertale is the only good video game released by Toby Fox at the dawn of time. It is available on all consoles in all places, even the Vatican. In fact, the vast majority of historians agree that Undertale has now replaced the Bible. If you don't believe me, book a room in a hotel and check the drawers. I love Undertale in a way that I wish I could love more video games, more anything. It's a brilliant trickster of a game that carefully watches how you play and then uses that information to create the illusion that it's bleeding out of your monitor's edges. It's a silly and playful and genuinely hilarious game, right until it decides to make you feel things, at which point it hits your heart like a freight train loaded with fireworks. And Kenny Omega likes it too.
I called it! I called it! Sam is here! Oh my god!
Undertale handles violence in a totally unique way, a way that even Toby Fox himself seems reticent to duplicate. Thanks to the game's pacifist route, if you choose not to kill any of the monsters that confront you, the entire world of the game changes. New options open up, a new and brighter ending is made available, and moreover, because no enemies have to be killed, every enemy you do kill is someone you kill by choice. It's voluntary, which makes the violence feel more real. And in the genocide route, that idea is taken to the extreme. You don't get to this route by playing normally. It's not a hell you can stumble into by accident. Even if you play like a normal JRPG hero, cutting down enemies left and right, you'll still most likely get a neutral ending. No, to take the genocide path, you have to kill everything. Everything. Every enemy, over and over and over and over, until nothing is left. It's brutal. It's cruel. Yeah, you can probably guess. I couldn't bear to make that choice either. But that awful, cruel path is a huge part of Undertale's story. Some of the most iconic moments in the game only happen in that route. Some of the best characters reveal their true heroism in that route. And huge revelations about the story of Undertale are completely hidden unless you experience that route. And so I took the half measure. I watched other people do the awful thing for me on YouTube, partly because I wanted to know the game's world more fully, and partly because that 100% part of my brain was burning with curiosity. I watched someone else play Undertale's genocide route, and Undertale knew I was gonna do that too. For all the reasons that interactive fiction is unique, watching somebody else play a game will never be the same as playing it yourself. It didn't matter if I read wiki summaries or watched a Let's Play. If I didn't play Roland's route myself, I would be losing something. And so, on my second playthrough, I took Roland's advice. I chose the church.
だから私は弱き者たちローゼル族に代わってこの決定に異を唱える
When you choose to take Roland's path and make Hyzant's religion the prevailing law of the land, the first consequence of your choice is that Frederica decides to duel Serenoa. It makes perfect sense that she would. Serenoa has chosen, no, you have chosen to empower the religious doctrine that condemns her and her people to forced labor. You have announced yourself as Frederica's enemy, as someone who would willingly enforce cruel suffering on her people to appease monsters. From that point on, you are as much her enemy as any Hyzantian bigot. While they duel, Frederica and Serenoa argue back and forth. Serenoa claims that he can change Hyzant from the inside, slowly and incrementally. Frederica retorts that her people are always told to wait patiently to be freed someday later, when the time is right. Her retort stings because it's true. It's true in the game, and it's true in real life. I've seen it over and over, not I, Serenoa, but I, Edward. Moderates complicit with brutal oppression promise paltry, incremental change. The time for revolution is always tomorrow, never today. Just keep waiting. The system will sort itself out. The people in charge will wake up. They have to, right? Just be patient, shut up, and keep waiting. And then I shut off my Switch. And I just looked at the blank blue TV screen for a while, and I thought. I thought about why I play games and why I like stories. I thought about the empty way I felt after treating New Vegas like a checklist instead of an adventure. I thought about growing up center left, confident that the people in charge would fix everything if I was just patient enough. I thought about all the times I've told my family that I no longer believe incremental changes can save the world. I thought about who I was, who I really was. And after sitting with my thoughts and a blue screen for a while, I felt really, really grateful that a video game got me to consider all of those things. So I reloaded my save file from before the big choice, and I picked a different ending. And I kept on playing until I finished 3 of the game's 4 endings. Only 3. I don't know what % completion I officially reached. I do know it's substantially less than 100, and I like it that way. I like it when games hurt me, and Triangle Strategy gave me some deep, satisfying aches. If anything, I wanted more. For instance, death during gameplay isn't permanent. A character reduced to 0 health will pop back up when the battle is over, which is a little jarring for a Fire Emblem stan like me. It's actually a decision that Team Asano made early on.
At the very beginning of this project, we discussed with the developer Ardink, do we take permadeath on this game? And we decided not to take that option. Because to create the proper mature storyline, we needed the characters in the storyline.
I understand why the developers made their choice, but I can't say I agree with it. Triangle Strategy is a game about the cruelty of war, so it feels wrong for death to be a minor inconvenience. Without permadeath, the violence in Triangle Strategy feels less final, and therefore less impactful than it does in a game like Fire Emblem. In fact, there's good evidence that the game's violence was made less brutal and less final at multiple points in development. Fans of Triangle Strategy who data mined the demo found a deleted scene in which an admirable and likable character faces a gruesome death as a direct result of Serenoa's choices. In the deleted scene, Jerome, a community leader among the Roselle, would have volunteered his life to protect the Roselle after Serenoa betrayed them. The scene would have ended with Roland beheading Jerome. For the developers to delete that scene, to consciously soften the consequences of Serenoa's worst choices, speaks to an impulse that I believe weakens Triangle Strategy overall. Beyond the big stuff, there are also some real nits I could pick if I wanted to, like the way one of the songs on Akira Senju's gorgeous soundtrack has the exact same melody as the Chipmunk Christmas song. This happens all the time in video games, and it doesn't matter at all, but it breaks my brain every single time. You hear it too, right? Right? But in spite of qualms large and small, my overall experience with Triangle Strategy was excellent. The game delivered me plenty of things I expected to love, like gorgeous aesthetics and crunchy logistics, and a few wonderful surprises I didn't expect, like the classic tabletop role-playing experience of hoarding NPC gossip to save the world. But the best surprise was how hard the game rocked me with 2 startling decisions, how it forced me to consider the way I'd been playing games for years. Because maximum completion is just not the right approach to every game. At best, that ethos can nudge you to more fully explore a world you already love. But it can also flatten a game, render every choice functionally meaningless and every adventure more or less identical. If you're willing to let your playthrough be incomplete, you're giving yourself the chance to carve out a narrative shape that's unique to you, one that might tell you something new and interesting about yourself. And that's a big part of why interactive fiction is so great to begin with. Oh shit, look at that! You are about to be 100% finished with this video. Nice. Hey, from the bottom of my heart, congratulations. But I still haven't told you about my first unbearable choice in a video game. Oof, sorry about that. Well, thank you for watching. Citations and further reading are in the description, and I especially want to highlight an interview with the producers of Triangle Strategy on Square Enix's YouTube channel. It's entirely in Japanese with no English subtitles, so it's completely inaccessible to me outside of some stray bits translated in the English-speaking games press. If you're fluent in Japanese and you're curious about the development of Triangle Strategy, you should absolutely check it out. Hey, how about that music? Akira Senju's soundtrack is so gorgeous. I obviously noticed it while I was playing, but going back and listening to it over and over, editing, it's just a stunner. Oh, and I totally biffed it on the release date for Fallout New Vegas. Just completely failed to check until I was editing, but hopefully it was very inconspicuous the way that I changed that in post. Right now I have 3 large essay scripts that are in development. I have a script about Legend of Legaia, a script about that spoilers are actually good study that I really hate, and a script about Pokemon that is turning into a fever dream. Scarlet Violet coming out in a few days, so that'll figure, I'm sure. But I also have a scrap from this video script that just didn't fit in the finished version anywhere, just sort of dunking on the dumbest character in the game, Gustadolf, and what a clown he is. So I'll probably just upload that as its own small thing sometime soon. If you want to see that, as of this moment, it is still not illegal to subscribe to me if you want to do that. So don't forget, money is fake, arm the homeless.